Good evening. My name is AnjaliRimi. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I am with Parivar Bay Area. And tonight, I am so honored to welcome some of the most visionary trans leaders in our community as we rebuild. Tonight, we talk about rebuilding trans lives. What next? We hope the pandemic has completed its course and we are now ready to move on to reopening and rebuilding lives. Parivar Bay Area has been alongside many organizations in saving trans queer lives, from leading the San Francisco LGBTQ COVID Relief Coalition to having global disaster relief programs in India and Guyana. We are beyond grateful for many, many partners who have supported us, 14,000 plus donors who supported us in resources and many corporations. But the folks you see on screen today that are joining us, each one of them did their part and more to save and to help our communities. Tonight, I'm joined and really grateful to have this conversation. And joining us tonight is Toni Newman, who is the interim CEO president of Black AIDS Institute. We are also joined by Diana Feliz Oliva, who is the associate director of community engagement and advocacy of Gilead Sciences. Honored to also welcome Cecilia Chung, senior director of strategic initiatives and evaluations at Transgender Law Center, and Nicole SantaMaria, executive director Ella para Trans Latinas. Our other guest, Feroza Syed, who is a remarkable South Asian trans leader, LGBTQ and Atlanta trans activist, is unable to join us and will do her best to be part of it when she can. She's had a family emergency come up, and we send her a lot of love and we stand with her through these tough times. I am incredibly blessed to have worked with each one of you in supporting Parivar's mission of saving South Asian trans lives. But our programs went beyond that, whether it was working with Toni on the LGBTQ COVID Relief Coalition and making sure people were housed, people had support with rent relief, to working with Nicole, whether it was as big as making sure folks had their groceries delivered, to making sure that they were housed, to making sure that they had their gift cards so they could take care of themselves. To Cecilia, who actually was a visionary, guided us in building a template that can be replicated and is sustainable in global disaster relief. She was instrumental in helping us take our work to Guyana and save trans women's lives there. And Diana Feliz Oliva has been part and present with Parivar in helping us be seen and have a voice in supporting those that struggle with comorbidities and those that were further marginalized during the pandemic. Not only did she lead a campaign at her workplace, Gilead, for supporting LGBTQ COVID Relief Coalition, but also our global disaster relief efforts for CETO, which was happening in India. So each one of you played a key role. And I would like to start by asking you, how did you take care of yourself during the pandemic? And how did the pandemic impact you in doing so?
I guess I'll go first. I wanted to say I'm honored to be here. And Anjali, I'm just so proud of you and what you've done between the US and the Asian countries and the money you raised. I'm just so proud that you guys are almost at $250,000 of a budget. And that is just amazing and due to your good work. So first and foremost, I want to support you and thank you and just say kudos to all your hard work. For me, I'm a heavy meditator. I'm a spiritualist. Um, so I meditate a lot. And I just try to stay in tune with myself. It was hard going 2 years remote. I was at Lyric as their interim president, working with youth during the first part of the pandemic. And now I'm at BAI, working with Black and Brown communities dealing with HIV and AIDS. It was tough, but I just meditated a lot, did a lot of self care. Did my own nails and feet since the salons were closed, my own manicure and pedicures. I teased my own eyebrows, and just talked to close friends such as I say Remy. Remy is the name that I call Anjali by, and just keeping in touch with friends that I thought that could encourage and motivate me. That's what I've been doing in order to keep my sanity, to keep my spirits up, and just to be present in the work that we're doing, both with the youth and with women and trans women of color who are the higher rates in HIV. There's work to be done. So that's what I did. And I'll let one of my other sisters take it from there.
Well, I think that I'm going next. Thank you, Toni. Thank you, all my sisters and siblings from the great gender expansive and trans folks that are doing a great job, not only, in different organizations, but also our trans siblings that are surviving the worst of this pandemic. So thank you all for your beautiful selves and for being here tonight. I'm incredible honor. So for your question, Anjali, I have indigenous roots. So I am Lenca Cacahuira from my home country, El Salvador. So I practice a lot of spirituality. So spirituality for me is very rooted. And in one of my spiritual practice is to be in contact with the Nahuales, which is the word for our spirit animal companions. So at the background, maybe you can hear birds. That's a sound diffuser. But in reality, I do have birds and other animal spirits companions that join me in this journey. So I'm an immigrant. Also, I'm a survivor of violence. So that's why 7 years ago, I came to this country. So since then, I've been trying to keep rooted with the land, rooted with the Pachamama, the Mother Earth, and continue having these beautiful connections with our community. When you are an immigrant, when you're a survivor, when you have to flee your home country to survive, one of the biggest things that you search is community. So being in community in this spike of this pandemic has also rooted me in my self-care, and also knowing that caring from others, it starts with caring with our own selves, whatever that it looks like. So it could be drinking water, it could be the smallest things that make your bed daily, or not doing it, or just sit still. So I've been just kind of a way of meditating, but in community with my siblings of the LGBTQI siblings, immigrants, but also with our extended siblings within nature. Thank you.
So beautifully said. Thank you, Toni and Nicole. Yes, I think
so. Let me jump in.
Yes.
Apologize for cutting out. Did you finish?
Go ahead, Cecilia, please.
Okay. So Nicole, I am the type that don't like making my bed. So thank you for mentioning. And I feel included. And I'm also an immigrant. And for me, I don't really have any spiritual practice. So, but it was very difficult. Like Toni had said, in the beginning, especially, I don't think that anybody have experienced this kind of shelter in place for so long. It's just, yeah, it's unprecedented. And I think that it really took me a while to adjust, not to mention in the Bay Area during the first year. Remember, there was the big fire and the whole sky turned orange. So it was not very good. It's not very good for my psyche. And I think that, that happens to all of us at the same time. And we lost some really important people, and I think that it's really important for us to remember them, because Lorena Brojas in New York, and she lost her fight to COVID, and it was so sudden that it took us a long time to grieve. And at the same time, we saw violence continue to escalate. We also see a war broken out, right now. So I think that for me, the main thing for me is to make sure that I focus on the things that are most important to me. So the first is my mother, because she's the only parent I have left. And I wanted to make sure that she didn't get sick. She got all her supplies. So I offer her from day one that I would do her grocery and go shopping for her. And then for the community, I think that the community is a great distraction. So when we get involved and when I get involved with the community, I think that, we could just be in that moment, that sometimes, we would forget what's going on outside. But I think that it's really important for two other things. One for me is because I had all this extra time, I decided to have a new hobby, which is planting. So I started with orchids, and now I am completely doing a makeover of my backyard. So these are all the things that I never thought I would do. But more importantly, we need to acknowledge the pain and the kind of impact everything is having on us. We cannot set this aside and come back to it later, because it's piling up day after day, and we're talking about 2.5 years of piling up every day. So this is really a time for us to find ways to channel these pain and energy. So Nicole and Toni, they meditate, and some of us would do other things, or see a therapist, or or Zoom in a therapist, since we can't see them in person. But I think that there's no fixed formula, but that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Cecilia. You all so beautifully put it, that word intersectionality came into play because it was just not our trans existence, the strangers that from a different shore that we all are. We had to react and take care of ourselves while making sure that we didn't lose more of our loved ones. Diana, would you like to share?
Sure. Just want to echo all of my sisters and siblings, what they've mentioned as far as our gratitude for this invite, Anjali. It's always beautiful and gracious to be amongst company and goddesses and warriors like yourself. So thank you for the very important invitation. The last 2 years, I have a social worker training background. And even in the last 2 years, with not only the COVID pandemic, but the civil and social justice uprisings that have happened, now, we're seeing this war tension in Eastern Europe and in Russia. And then we've lost so many. We just had a record-breaking number of trans people murdered last year. And so it's just hard for anyone living in this country to deal with. And I think sometimes we just really don't talk about self-care or mental health and emotional well-being, especially during these 2 years. But for me, it was difficult. I just bought a house right before the pandemic, and that thankfully took a lot of my time of doing some home improvements. I have a small little backyard and a small little front yard, so I got involved in gardening, and lo and behold, that really helped with my mental health and emotional well-being. Who knew that I had a green thumb? So I got to share some tips with Cecilia at her backyard. And I love shopping and interior design. So buying a home in the beginning of the pandemic really kind of occupied my mind space for the first year, for the first 12 months, because I actually thought this whole time I was an introvert, and COVID taught me that I'm actually an extrovert. But I think I'm a solitude, lonely extrovert, because I actually love my quiet times at home. Now that I have a home, I just love spending peaceful, quiet times, either reading a book or binge watching television and not making my bed or brushing my teeth or taking a shower, to be honest. But it's just allowed me to kind of engage in more of work-life balances because I'm a type A personality and I give 200% in every work project I do. And I think the COVID really has, and this pandemic and everything that we've experienced in the last 2.5 years has really taught me to kind of slow down and prioritize what's important. So during the pandemic, I actually got a French bulldog. People that follow me on social media know that I have a little 2-year-old French bulldog named Diego, and he's the love and joy of my life. And he's been a godsend during this pandemic and the uprisings and all the killings that we've seen in the last 2 years. You know, so putting that altruism instead of in person with people and activities, because unfortunately we are work limited as far as what we're able to do in person, but transferring that love and joy and that energy to a puppy, you know, I think has just been amazing for my emotional well-being. I've also, you know, my family lives about 2.5, 3 hours away from Oakland in Fresno. And so I've noticed that I go to Fresno about 2 weekends out of the month, which I used to visit my family maybe once every 2 or 3 months. But I think this COVID has really taught me the importance of the family and maintaining those relationships. And so there's been relationships that have been mended during COVID with my mom and myself. And so I can see my mom now that she's aging, she needs to be or wants to be spoiled and pampered and nurtured. And so I'm glad that I'm physically able to do that for her. I've just picked up cooking, I picked up reading. I actually signed up for mental health therapy for the very first time in my life during these last 2 years, because this past 12 months has been really difficult for me. A lot of trauma has come up from years past during this pandemic. And so instead of being in a funk for weeks or months on end, I thought to myself, let me, you know, take care of myself. I'm always preaching about the importance of mental health, but I've never actually been a client or a patient. And so about 6 months ago, I actually embarked on the journey of mental health and emotional well-being. And it's just been amazing and really just helped me to categorize or compartmentalize certain things that are happening around us. And so I'm just really grateful that thankfully I'm still alive, I'm healthy, I'm surrounded by family and friends who love me, and that I'm able to do this important service for the community and by the community. So thank you.
Oh, powerful words there, Diana, and really riveting. I've seen each one of you, and we at Parivar really respect all the work you've done, because it's not easy when we have had such difficult trans journeys to also do this work and keep building that trans resilient movement. You know, the world was filled with a lot of grief and insecurity, but the world also got to learn how to respect and how to really show up and really put where the action needs to happen, not just words. So, you know, how do you think we can continue to build the trans movement forward? And have you seen that happen during the pandemic? And, you know, how would you say we should move forward with that as we reopen?
Toni Newman here. I would say I found that during this time, I've talked to straight allies and cis folk who have been very, very collaborative during this time of working with the trans youth and working at Lyric when we're dealing with youth between the ages of 11 and 24. So I do think there's been a little movement. You have people like Jack Dorsey, who's just been so kind to Lyric and Black AIDS Institute, Mackenzie Scott, who are supporting trans issues as well, and other billionaire foundations are accepting LOIs at this time. So I think there's some movement. You know, I always tell people, actions speak louder than words. You know, when you tell me you love me, that's just words. You have to show me. And some of these people are doing that. They're showing that they care. So I do think there's some movement. I think we need to be cognizant and reach out to our trans brothers and sisters who might not have families, and I try to stay in touch with those around me just to let them know I'm here if you need me. So I think, by reaching out and just letting people know, but, being trans, it can be a lonely journey. Being a trans man or woman, for color or not of color, it can be lonely. Even if you do have loved ones who are supporting you, it's a lonely journey. And you have to find that median. And I always tell trans folk, you got to find what works for you. What works for Toni and what may work for Nicole may not work for you. But this is a tough road. You made a decision basically to transition from A to B. It's a tough road. And I've been in it for 25 years. I'm happy now. I'm loved now. But it's been some very, very, very hard times. So I think unity, I would love to see more unity in our community, working together, the Blacks with the Asians, with the whites. There's a little division sometimes. And I would love for us to be more unified. But I'm optimistic. I'm an optimistic person that things are moving slowly, but forward. So I will continue to be optimistic about our community. I think, we got such great people now. Dr. Levine as the Deputy Secretary of HSS. We've got people in city councils. So, there's movement here besides wonderful actors and actresses. I love entertainment, but I really applaud those that are doing the work to help the community, such as every one of you. I think Pose is wonderful. It's a beautiful show. I loved it. But, that's not the role for most of us, to be celebrities and movie stars. Some of us have to work and go forward and do the work. So we just got to keep working together as a team in collaborative nature.
Maybe I'll go next. And I appreciate what you said, Anjali. I think that the last 2.5 years, it really taught us a lot, especially the importance of community and, do our part. I think that the message I got from the last 2.5 years was really about doing our part. That's why we were having these conversations about international, emergency relief, for other country that is less fortunate than us. And really focus on looking at how to redistribute some of, the wealth that we have and share with the most needy in the community. So I was really very invigorating to have those conversations with you about the rescue effort that you're doing, and on the mutual aid that you have been you have been working on. And I think that the other things that is really important to point out is that we are still hearing some very negative voices, against us, in different part of this country. But we know we are winning because, like Toni said, we are seeing more leadership coming up. And I think that it's really important to continue to give opportunities and develop leadership, especially in Black trans communities and also the trans immigrants community. I think that there's a lot of room to grow, and for some of us who are more privileged to find ways to continue to contribute.
Thank you both.
I can share a little bit about this journey. I think that, as my sisters have already said, I would like to mention that here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have had, since at the beginning of the pandemic, we created a group. So it was the coalition. We created a coalition that it was the LGBTQI plus a COVID relief coalition. So with this group, that it was many different organizations in the Bay, we were able to come together. Even that in some moments, maybe in the past, there hasn't been the opportunities to come together really in this strong community that we are for sure. But pandemic it brought us together. So I think that this is an opportunity to see that when we don't need to have a pandemic to come together, because we have already faced for centuries the pandemic of hatred. So the pandemic of hatred has been within our communities forever. It is not only the HIV, it is not only the pandemic of HIV, the pandemic of COVID, it's also the pandemic of hatred that Diana had already told us that last year was the most, year that we lost the majority of our siblings just here in the United States. But with Anjali and the work that different organizations that we do work in the South, Global South, we see that these cases, the hatred has taken many of our siblings as well. So there is a need to continue being very vocal because in coming together, because COVID is in the way to be endemic, but hatred seems that it is not in that road yet. But that's why we need to come together. And doesn't matter that it's just trans or gender expansive communities. We need also the rest of the letters, or the rest of the identities, the rest of the sexual orientations to come together and let us lead this work as well. Because we are the face and the most vulnerable. We are the ones who are putting the blood on the streets. So it's important to recognize the trans and then gender diverse communities and come together and unify us. So I think that that's a gift that COVID has given us, seeing our resiliency, seeing the power that we have in community, working together in community and taking and caring and serving our communities, because we have been the ones who have been raised a lot of money to be present for the less fortunate communities here in the United States and also in the South, Global South. So thank you.
And just want to quickly share, I've been able to increase the movement for the trans community internally here at Gilead Sciences. Before I got hired, there was no openly trans person working for Gilead. And in 2017, I became the first trans person. And since then, I've really dedicated my work service to amplify and highlight the trans narrative within our company. And that's not only internally, but also externally. And so I was grateful enough to work with our public affairs executives to come up with, our first ever trans initiative, which was a $4.5 million to the trans community that's just, got started a few months before the COVID pandemic hit. And since then, we just finished our first 2 years of our 2-year grant of Transcend. And we just launched the second phase of Transcend, which is another 2 years of trans initiatives. And we've increased our budget to almost 5 million for the next 2 years. And in addition to that, when COVID hit in 2020, we launched within our corporate giving structure another $20 million grant to help all grantees that we fund, not only here in the US, but across the globe, for capacity building or technology grants. So if people needed to transition their workforce to remote places like their homes or what have you, we gave grants money for them to buy, laptops and IT equipment so their transition from office to home was seamless. Also, we provided additional grants for capacity building and for general operations. So we made sure that our grantees' doors remained open for those limited in-person services that they were able to demonstrate for many of our patients and our clients living with a chronic illness such as HIV or oncology or hepatitis. And so we've been able to create a lot of initiatives internally here at Gilead, and then created the non-discrimination policy for trans employees and their families. And just recently, a couple of months ago, we announced during Transgender Day of Remembrance that as a company, we created a transition playbook for managers who may have a trans or gender non-binary employee beginning their transition and needed assistance. So we've trained all our managers and our executive heads in regards to this transition playbook that we created for many of our employees and family members. So we've done a lot of great movement for the trans community here at Gilead. Externally, as a trans person, as a brown trans person, as a person living with HIV for over 20 years, the work that I do at Gilead is not just a career decision that I made 4 years ago, or it's not a job that pays the bills. The salary is great and all that, but I always say that I always, get paid by Gilead, but I actually work for the trans community. And first and foremost, so at every decision table that I'm at every meeting room or conference room or Zoom meeting that I have with my colleagues, I'm always bringing up the trans community, and especially the Black and the brown community, which, disproportionately is impacted by HIV and any other chronic illnesses that we, trying to develop innovative solutions for. And so, there's a lot of weight on my shoulders, and I happen to be, unfortunately, the only trans person in public affairs leading many of these initiatives. But I carry that with great esteem and honor, because I know that I'm not alone in these, corporate towers at Gilead, that I bring the whole community and the whole voice of the community to these tables. What I've done in regards to my leadership and my resiliency outside of Gilead is that, buying that home allowed me to start having social gatherings at my home with a limited amount of people, sporadically throughout the years. And I didn't know that having just a casual, personal, social barbecue in my backyard will create trans resiliency and trans leadership. And I think, I've been really able to take advantage in the last 2.5 years of those small in-person gatherings, because I think it's when you have those organic, natural habitats or gatherings, when you bring 2 or more trans people together, build resiliency and leadership. I've got to break bread with AnjaliRimi and so many other of my Bay Area trans brothers and sisters. I've been traveling a lot, taking road trips to Los Angeles and meeting my Southern Cal trans Latina leaders. I've traveled to the South, I've traveled to the East Coast. And so every in my travels, I always try to seek out some social gatherings with my trans sisters or brothers or siblings, to making sure that I'm checking in on them and they're checking in on me as well. Just because I'm a leader and I have a particular position at Gilead doesn't mean that I need support, doesn't mean that I need a call. And so I always like to practice of what I want. So I'm always reaching out to my brothers and sisters or my siblings, because I'm hoping that that is reciprocated as well, because we need that camaraderie, we need that unity, we need that checking in with each other, especially more than ever during these times.
Thank you, Diana, and to each one of you for sharing how you moved out the needle and kept us going. It's fascinating for me to see that the most marginalized and the most under-resourced community or an individual are still doing so much more. And that was such an awakening for us at Parivar, whether it was the 22 organizations that came together, like you mentioned, Nicole, for the coalition right here in the Bay Area and helped over 900 people, or it was in Guyana, where it was Cecilia and me working through our organizations and supporting folks there, or in India, where we had over 44 Seetal Parivar warriors on the ground. Trans people have had to take care of our own people. And that could not be the more eye-opening thing for the greater world. And I really hope that they understand and see that even during the pandemic, the hate and the erasure was at its heights. And we still kept going with a big smile, grace, and sophistication to do whatever it needed to take care of ourselves. Parivar started with with a very modest idea of bringing South Asian visibility, but we understood that our role was much bigger than that. There's 42 organizations that are LGBT in the San Francisco Bay Area, but our intersectional identities seem to keep us all in our little silos. So one of the things that Parivar has taken on is to break those silos, just like all the boundaries across the world got broken when we had the pandemic and went in to do work. Before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of work through our advocacy through arts. During the pandemic, we started in the San Francisco Bay Area. Then we did all this work. And then now we're coming to a point where we need to continue to do this conversation and continue the conversation, whether it's vaccinations, healthcare equity, and just understanding how do we rebuild from it. But there's been times in the pandemic where trans people have struggled even more to breathe, to not have that oxygen tank, and with very limiting, resources. And yet we take on these huge responsibilities, which that's why I asked beginning with self-care, because that's so important. We take on these huge responsibilities to save our trans, and then by virtue of that, bring in our queer cis collective so we can all be liberated. We were helped in so many different ways, but we also were desperate. We were very grateful for all the support. And when I say we as a community and also as Parivar, how do you balance that desperation and selecting who you work with? And as a trans community, do we have that choice of selecting who we say, okay, you can come help us when they raise their hand, or should we operate always from a sense of desperation?
Well, speaking for myself, I put my hand out, but I only help those that give me their hand back. I've been doing this for 20 years, working with the trans community, and there has to be a desire within that individual to want help. I've tried to help so many individuals and worked with St. James and Ella, and we've reached out to so many of our trans sisters who just were not ready or able to receive the love and the care that we really wanted to give them. So for me, I open my door to everyone, but I only can work with those that walk through the door willingly and voluntarily. You have to be willing and able to want to receive help. I've reached out, when you say desperation, at St. James, I work with a really desperate community of sex workers and homeless trans. I think that was one of my positions, that I was working with our most marginalized folk in the Tenderloin. And we went out night after night giving gift cards, trying to feed them. But you can only help those that would like to be helped. You can only help those that want to receive the love you have to give. So that's my standing. I open the door and say, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm able, I want to, but you've got to want to give that love back. So I try to work with the community that want the help, because I reached out to those that didn't want the help and found that the success level was very, very, very low. You've got to be ready to accept the help that I'm trying to give you. That's just for my own self-care. I can't run down the street and chase you when you don't want my help. I've done that before, and it wasn't good for my mental health, because I'm like, why don't they want the help? We're really trying to help you, but you can only help those that really want to help themselves. So I open my door to all of my brothers and sisters, but they have to walk through for me to be able to give that love. That's just my point here.
Thank you, Toni. Yes, we have to be ready to receive help too.
Well, yes, I echo Toni's words, but for example, in our case at Ella, Ella para Trans Latina is the only trans-led Latinx organization in the entire San Francisco Bay Area. So my background is in art therapy. So for me, the mental health or the mental awareness is crucial to navigate desperation, despair, isolation, trauma, mental health. So I don't get the you know the decision to say I'm gonna help this or those, but yeah, it is for me. It is a thing that I'm gonna meet with whoever arrives to Ella that needs my support or needs our support to walk with them in this journey, whatever their needs are, and meet them wherever they are at. So that's helpful for me, as my mental health as well, that the opportunities have given in a very fair way. For example, we opened a COVID relief fund. So far we have given over $200K to direct assistance to our participants. So it has been through our surveys, through every month work with case managers that help us, bring this support to our community, because at the end, it is not a way that helping them. I don't feel that I'm helping them. I feel that I'm within them, that I'm with my community, just taking care and assisting and accompany them, whatever their journeys are. So thank you.
And Remy just put the question in. Yes, I would take help from someone who wanted to support the trans TGNC cause. As if it's legal and well-intended, absolutely. And have I done that before? Yes, I have. From people who were not people who you would think would want to support, but they have offered to support and they were well-intentioned. Yes, I would take that money. If it's well-intentioned and is legal, I would sure take that money and wouldn't have any problems taking their money. To answer the question that Remy just put in the chat, yes, I would. I would take that money.
Thank you. It definitely goes both ways. Cecilia or Diana?
One of the idea that was so exciting for me is to see Diana got, when that position opened, the first person I could think of was Diana. So, and I'm just so grateful to see that, she is now in a position to really offer the community change. But like Toni said, they have to ask for it. We can't just assume that we give people money and they're gonna, know how to use it and what they're gonna do. So, we still need to find a way to structure that conversation. So when you get that money, what's your plan? And it, well, for me, it's a little bit different from Toni, and is that I don't know if I can say no to anybody. I try to but if I say no, I will hear about it tomorrow all over the place. But it's really important to take care of ourselves. The way that I found was helpful for me to take care of myself were to focus on the success stories, throughout these times of the people that we've touched, of the people that we mentored, and of the people that we have helped. By looking at how their life transformed, that gave me, the most amount of gratitude and inspirations. So yes, there will always be people who need to try and try and try again. But as long as, they are willing to try, I'm willing to support. And, if one way doesn't work, let's figure out how to change the way. We managed to change the way that foundations were soliciting proposals from the trans community. So if we can do that, we can do a lot more. And so, I think that the sky is the limit. So don't limit by what we have, but look at, who else to bring in to do the work.
Yeah, so important what Cecilia just mentioned, and just want to piggyback on that. I think the last 2.5 years should have taught organizations or corporations is that we can't do this work alone. And sometimes we do as trans leaders. I've heard that in the last 2.5 years, especially managing the Transcend Community Impact Fund, and we're trying to provide them additional grant making funding opportunities or capacity building so they can sustain their nonprofit organization for years to come. And sometimes trans leaders will say, no, thank you, we got this, instead of saying, well, yes, give us all the tools and resources that you want to invest in us so we can come out on top. And it's a little bit sad to see that, where I think the last 2.5 years, if I didn't learn anything the last 2.5 years, was to build coalitions, build community partnerships. Our work is not exclusionary to any other human rights movement in this country or around the globe. So why aren't we partnering with the Black Lives Matter movement? Why aren't we partnering with corporations more? Why aren't we partnering with, XYZ? These are really important times for us to, instead of reinventing the wheel, partnering with other organizations that have a similar cause. Okay, maybe they're addressing immigration detention centers. Well, trans communities are not the only ones and have the exclusive or copyrights to do that work. There's many other Latinx organizations, human rights organizations doing that. And so partner with those organizations. Same thing with violence, same thing with intimate partner abuse, same thing with substance use, same thing with houselessness, education, it goes on and on and on. There's so many intersectionalities that we really should develop these formal coalitions and create these macro building systems rather than working in our own little silos. Now, when I worked at St. John's as the clinic manager, before I became a corporate colleague at Gilead, you couldn't say no to clients or patients. I mean, we're a federally qualified health center and we had to see patients every day. And if they acted not so nice and they wanted another appointment the next week, we had to abide by that. There was no ands, if, or buts about it, right? And I think now in a corporate setting, I can set boundaries that are good for me, for my mental and emotional well-being, to say, it's okay to say no. Because when I was a nonprofit, I want to say nonprofit queen, and I became a corporate queen, it's almost night and day, right? You're a servant to the community when you're working in nonprofit. It's hard for you to say no, but you don't want to be burned so many times. So you have to start developing these professional leadership boundaries. And you only learn that from other leaders that have gone through your experience, or investing in your own professional self-leadership development. And if you haven't, as a leader, haven't invested, taken a strategic retreat, or taken a webinar on how to say no, right? Or how to negotiate for a salary. Like, these are all parts of your investments of your professional and your personal and your leadership development. And if you don't prioritize yourself first, and you're always doing the community and the patients and the clients first, you're going to burn out and you're going to run out of energy, and then you're going to be scratching your head and you're going to be saying, I knew it was the trans community's their fault. And really it's not, right? We need to be okay with saying no from time to time, and really to building up those networking relationships and the strategic relationships. And it's about not only cultivating those relationships, but you have to maintain them. It's like a marriage or like a partner, or it's like, a relationship with your employees and your bosses. Is that you have to maintain, you checking in, you check to see if they're okay, what services they need. And then you have to ask yourself too, hey, these are the services and the tools that I need, supervisor or boss or company, in order for me to be successful. So for me, I think it's all about coalition building in order for us to increase our own trans movement, either within our own micro ecosystems or our macro ecosystems.
Thank you all. I definitely heard accountability there on all parties, accountability at a micro level for individuals in our community to be ready to receive, and also that walk into our community to help, to be equitable, to be really fully intended in that. And as organizations, to really have that structure so we can showcase the work we're doing. And I think that's kind of a very salient feature for us at Parivar. As most of you know, and folks know, we are relatively new, if I may say so. We are going into our 4th year, but we have definitely grown very quickly. And we're now walking and making sure that we have those building blocks put into place very, very quickly. And so I could not attest more to the fact that we need structure, and we also need to build these coalitions, because we absolutely don't need to each one of us do the same programs all over again. So what we are trying to do at Parivar is to take that guidance, continue to look up to leadership that's going to guide us, and do programs that are going to supplement work that's already happening in direct health services, whether that's with Ella or the immigrant clinics, or with the Transgender Law Center helping folks in building more bridges around cultural immersions, leadership development, and continuing to bridge and be the platform for those of us that might feel that our intersectional identities are leaving us behind. So, we are almost towards the end of this beautiful conversation. I wanted to keep it going. But what would you say to the trans hijra person in India, or the trans person in Rio Grande Valley in Texas, or those hundreds of communities that Parivar Bay Area and each one of your organizations, each one of your leaders has helped through this pandemic, that has really taken a toll on our health, our mental well-being, and each one of us is doing this work. So, what advice would you give the community, or to an individual if they walked up to you in this, as we really sincerely hope that this is over and we can rebuild, and the next time we're doing this is in person? What advice would you give?
I would say we love you. Keep optimism and hope alive. And if you need anything, we have your back. We are stronger than we were 10 years ago, and we're even stronger than we were 20 years ago. There's a lot of room to grow, but we have some amazing, amazing people in our community. So I would say just, be optimistic. Reach out to your local TGNC organizations. And if you need help, don't be afraid to ask. I was afraid 15 years to ask because I got rejected so many times. But when I began to ask, the doors begin to open. So feel free to ask, and don't be afraid to ask for what you need. And if one person can't do it, go to another. But get what you need in order to survive and to be your authentic self, would be my advice.
Thank you, Toni. So beautiful. We love you.
I'll add to that a little bit, is that I would also tell them that I understand their struggle because I've been in the same shoes before, and use myself as an example that, I got out of it. If I could get out of it, if San Francisco could get out of it, Texas will get out of it one day. So even though it's not today, but it will happen, we cannot give that up. And also the other things that I think is really important is about build your power base. You need to find out that you're not alone, and you need to find out that there are people to catch you if you fall. That's the most important part, like in the work that we're doing today, especially in places like Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi, a lot of like the southern states. Yeah, and of course, like last but not least, we also have to make sure that if they need resources, we do our best to connect them with resources. I don't know if opening our wallets is practical, because like there's so many people that we need to open the wallet for, but I think that it's more important to teach them how to fish so they can feed themselves for life.
Help them how to fish. Thank you, Cecilia.
Well, first, I don't give advices, but I will say to my siblings over there, to the entire LGBTQI plus, but specifically to transgender, diverse, and intersex communities, that first, that you are not alone and that you are worth it. That please create a safety plan, whatever that it feels safe for you. Please do it. It is worth the time and the effort to invest in yourself, whatever, however that it looks like. And also, I would like to mention that many of our stories needs to heal. We need to heal, healing our narratives, healing our stories that have been told for others, not from us. So make sure that every time that you refer as yourself with so much love that no matter how much hatred there is in the world, you have the right story of yourself and you are the protagonist, the one who is writing your story, and you are the one who have your voice heard. So here we are for you. So if you or someone that you love, it is a trans, immigrant, LGBTQI, or but in particular trans and gender diverse that is immigrant here in the United States, don't hesitate to come to either of us or whatever organization that you see, but in particular as ELA para Trans Latinas, if you are not Latinx, we are going to find a way to get you to the right path with your communities. But as gender diverse, trans community, intersex folks, we got each other. So please reach out. We don't want to lose nobody more, for hatred, for violence, and for suicide. You're worth it. You deserve the love of this world and to heal.
Amazing, wonderful words. I wish, I would have received these words over 2 decades ago when I was a baby trans person. But, we all go through our experiences because that's how we learn and that's how we grow, right? And so for the people in India or in Texas or in El Salvador or in Russia or Ukraine, that are going through so many obstacles, so many personal experiences, so many hardships, I would want to say that you have a whole warrior of trans siblings behind you. You're never alone. Don't ever feel that you're alone. And I think the first step is really falling in love with yourself. Sometimes as trans people or gender non-binary people, we're never taught self-love or love, period. And it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey to be and to fall in love with yourself. It's still hard for me from time to time to look in the mirror and love me, all of me, the good, the bad, and everything in between, because I believe that my past sex work experience, I should be ashamed of right now in 2022, or me being arrested and being in the Twin Towers of County LA jail doesn't allow me a space at Gilead Sciences running a trans program. Or, me being a poor farm worker back when I was 5 or 6 years old doesn't entitle me to an Ivy League education from Columbia University. Don't believe in those naysayers. Don't believe in those negative people. And if there's one thing that I can say and leave you with is to surround yourself with people who love, uplift, and empower you. I haven't been as successful in my personal and my professional life without my family behind me, and with the chosen family in the last 20 plus years that are always rooting for me. When I have some good news or not so good news, I can pick up the phone and call one of my brothers and sisters in the LGBTQI community, and they would give me some feedback. They would, snap me back into reality or lift me up into the clouds because of my great achievements. It's really important to surround yourself with people that love you and celebrate you. And also to never forget to, take time for yourself. Sometimes we're so busy trying to heal the world, trying to save the world, trying to make the world better. But sometimes being quiet, being in stillness with yourself, whether that's either meditating or praying. I wish I had more discipline where I could meditate more or be more spiritual, but unfortunately like that. But I've gotten to reading books or spending time or walking my dog. And just those little joys in my life bring me so much happiness and so much peace. So for all those people all over the world that are hearing and seeing us today, if no one's told you today that they love you, let me be the first one to say, I love you, we all love you, and you have a whole warrior tribe rooting for you, for your success. And every hardship and every experience that you're experiencing right now, it will pass. You're not destined to repeat the mistakes and the hardships. So you're going to overcome them with the whole tribe that we have behind you. So thank you.
Wow. I think a whole lot of folks are watching are probably choked up as much as me, because those words really resonate. The love is the strongest, and that we will build together. And so, the whole conversation for us to ask ourselves what next. So I'm happy to share that, we are starting to come back to life, and Parivar Bay Area has some very important announcements and events planned coming up in March and beyond. So definitely a great way to get us inspired, motivated, while taking care of ourselves during this reopening and rebuilding. And I want to thank each one of you for taking the time to join us here at Parivar Bay Area and share your wisdom, your elegance, and your resilience, all so beautifully coupled and layered with oodles of love and respect and grace and intellect. This wisdom is what has come down to us from all of our ancestors. And I wish this wisdom could have saved those trans people that we're losing right this very minute. And so we dedicate this conversation to them, and making sure that hopefully there is not another tomorrow that we have to lose. And we at Parivar Bay Area will continue to come through on our mission of building a South Asian community of queer trans people, a community of light, love, and respect for everybody who is LGBTQ, their allies, beyond our skin tone, our national origin, our immigration status, our HIV status, and really fight for equity, inclusion, and justice for trans, non-binary, intersex, HETRA, and two-spirited, indigenous, and Black, brown folks everywhere. And we are just now getting started. And the pandemic really taught us to start running before we could walk. And you all ran with us. So we appreciate you being on the marathon. And thank you again to everybody who watched us. Please do follow these great leaders on their Instagram handles as well as their LinkedIn profiles. And we look forward to seeing you in person very soon. Welcome back is what I will say. And on behalf of everybody at Parivar Bay Area, thank you, Cecilia, Toni, Diana, Nicole, and in spirit, Feroza, who could not join us tonight. Thank you very much. Be well. Namaste.